Your financial life isn't broken. It just doesn't work the way you were told it should. And if that sentence feels uncomfortable, it should. Because think about your own life for a second. You're probably putting in more effort than you did a year ago. You're more focused, more aware, maybe even more disciplined. You're trying to do the right things. You're watching your spending. You're thinking more seriously about investing. You're paying attention in ways you didn't before. And still, when you look at your bank account, your investments, your savings, your actual progress, it feels almost the same. Maybe slightly better. Maybe a little cleaner. But not enough to match the amount of effort you're giving. And that's the part that starts to mess with you. Because from the outside, it looks like you're moving forward. You're busy, you're working, you're trying, you're making better decisions than before. But inside, it feels like running harder on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. You feel the burn. You feel the exhaustion. You feel yourself pushing. But when you look around, you haven't really moved. And that frustration, it doesn't come from laziness. It doesn't come from being careless. It comes from something deeper, something most people never really get taught. Because what if the problem isn't how hard you're trying, but where you're trying from? And if that question hits a little too close, stay with me. Because once you see the structure behind this, you stop blaming yourself for things that were never just about effort. And before we go deeper, if you want more videos that break down money, power, and systems in a way that actually makes sense, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this video isn't just about medieval society. It's about you. Most people grow up believing money is simple. Work more, earn more, save more. Eventually, you get ahead. That's the story. That's the model. That's what makes everything feel fair. It gives you something to hold on to. It makes the world feel understandable. It tells you that if you just keep going long enough, if you just become responsible enough, if you just make the right choices over and over again, eventually, the results will show up. But real systems aren't built like that. They're layered, quietly, invisibly, almost intentionally hard to see. There are levels to this game, and each level plays by a completely different set of rules. Not slightly different, completely different. And here's the part that catches people off guard. You can do everything right and still go nowhere. Not because you're making obvious mistakes, not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline, but because what works at one level does absolutely nothing at another. The rules shift, the leverage changes, the outcomes follow different patterns. But no one tells you that. So you keep optimizing, you tweak your habits, you push harder, you try to fix your life from inside a structure that was never designed to move you forward in the first place. And once you really see that, something inside you shifts. Because suddenly, it's not random anymore. It's structural. And the truth is, this system isn't new. It's just hidden better now. So if you want to understand it clearly, you have to go back to a time when it wasn't hidden at all. A time when the structure was obvious. A time when your level wasn't something you guessed from your salary, your job title, or the car you drove. It was something you lived inside every single day. Medieval society? Back then, the system wasn't abstract. It wasn't disguised behind corporate language, financial advice, productivity books, or motivational quotes. It was direct, visible, brutally clear. You didn't just have more or less money. You had a position, a fixed place in a structure that defined almost everything. What you could do, what you could own, how far you could realistically go, and what kind of life you were even allowed to imagine. There were people at the very bottom, working constantly just to survive. Slightly above them were people who had a little more control, but still lived with uncertainty hanging over everything. Then there were people who developed skills, built things, repaired things, traded goods, people who started to move value instead of just producing it. Higher still were those who didn't just participate in the system, but influenced how it worked. And above all of them, those who held authority itself. 8 levels. 8 completely different realities, and each one followed its own rules. At the bottom, people believed effort was everything, because effort was all they had. In the middle, people started to notice something more uncomfortable, that where you stand often matters more than how hard you push. And at the top, the realization becomes even harder to ignore. The system itself can be shaped, controlled, enforced, so the question becomes harder to avoid. If you were born into one of those levels, could you actually leave it? Or would every decision you make, every opportunity you notice, every risk you take, still be filtered through the position you started from? Because the most dangerous part about systems like this isn't that they exist. It's that most people inside them never realize they're there. And once you see it, really see it, you don't look at effort the same way again. So let's strip everything back. No modern language, no distractions, no motivational filter, just the raw structure, starting from the very bottom, the place where choice barely exists at all. Level 1, the survivor. There's a man named Thomas, and Thomas doesn't think about the future the way you do. He doesn't sit down and plan 5 years ahead. He doesn't set goals in a notebook. He doesn't map out strategies, compare options, or ask himself what kind of life he wants to build. His life is measured in days, sometimes in hours. He wakes up tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from one bad night of sleep. It's deeper than that. It's the kind of tired that never really leaves your body. The kind that sits in your bones because yesterday didn't really end. It just paused for a few hours. The land he works on isn't his. The time he gives isn't his. Even the effort he puts in isn't fully his to direct. If the weather changes, his life changes. If the harvest fails, everything collapses. If someone above him demands more, he has almost no room to say no. There's no safety net waiting for him. No savings account. No backup plan. No system designed to catch him if something goes wrong. So he adapts. He reacts. He survives. And from the outside, it almost looks like he's doing everything right. He works hard. He shows up. He pushes through. He doesn't complain because complaining doesn't change anything. It looks like effort should lead somewhere. But it doesn't. Because here, effort doesn't build anything. It just keeps things from falling apart. The more he works, the more he stays exactly where he is. And over time, something subtle happens. He stops asking, "How do I get ahead?" and starts asking, "How do I make it through?" That's the shift survival creates. It shrinks your world. It pulls your focus so close to the present that escape doesn't even feel real anymore. Freedom becomes something you hear about, not something you expect to experience. And maybe that sounds ancient. Maybe it sounds far away. But the feeling isn't. Because even today, there are people living a version of this. Working constantly, running from bill to bill, making it through the week. Not because they lack ambition, but because survival consumes the energy that ambition needs. And just above Thomas, there's someone who believes things might be different. Level 2, the conditional freedom. His name is Elias. Elias still wakes up early. He still works the land. He still depends on things he can't fully control. The weather, the season, the demands of people above him, the price of grain, the timing of one bad year. On the surface, his life doesn't look that different from Thomas's. But there's one small difference, and that difference changes how everything feels. Some of what Elias produces is his. Not all of it, never all of it, but enough to make him believe that his decisions matter. He chooses what to plant. He manages his small piece of land. He watches the season carefully. He thinks a little further ahead. And for the first time, effort and outcome feel connected. Like if he just gets it right, if he plans better, if he works smarter, if he avoids mistakes, things could improve. And that belief is powerful. Because once you feel even a little control, you start to imagine more. You start to think, maybe I'm not trapped. Maybe there's a way up. Maybe the difference between staying here and moving forward is just better decisions. But then reality shows up. A bad season doesn't just slow him down. It pushes him backwards. Taxes still come. Obligations don't disappear. People above him still expect their share. And no matter how carefully he plans, there are forces he can't control. So his freedom is real, but it's fragile. And slowly, almost without noticing, he falls into a different kind of trap. He starts believing that if he optimizes enough, if he works smarter, not just harder, if he manages every little detail perfectly, he can break out. But the truth is, he's still playing inside a system that caps how far optimization can take him. Because at this level, the problem isn't effort, it's leverage. And until that changes, progress stays limited. You can improve your situation. You can breathe a little easier. You can make things less painful. But you still don't control the structure. And that's the quiet frustration of conditional freedom. You're not completely trapped anymore, but you're not truly free either. You can move, but only within a narrow space. You can choose, but only from the options the system gives you. And for a while, that feels like progress. Until you start noticing people above you, people who aren't just optimizing within the rules, but playing a different kind of game entirely. Because there is a level where things finally begin to shift. Level 3, the skill builder. There's a man named Daniel. Daniel doesn't work the land the way Thomas or Elias do. He works with his hands, but in a different way. He builds, repairs, shapes, creates things that people actively come to him for. A broken tool, a wooden frame, a piece of metalwork, something practical, something useful, something that carries value because not everyone can do it. And for the first time, income isn't tied purely to survival conditions. It's tied to skill. It's tied to value. That changes everything. Because now, time spent learning actually matters. It compounds. It turns into something more than just effort. So Daniel invests in his craft. Years of it. Watching, practicing, failing, fixing mistakes, starting over, improving in ways no one notices at first. At the beginning, he's slow. He makes errors. His hands don't move with confidence yet. But over time, something changes. He starts seeing patterns. He starts knowing what will break before it breaks. He starts making decisions that someone less skilled wouldn't even recognize as decisions. And eventually, something clicks. People don't just pay him for his time. They pay him for what he can do. And that shift is powerful. For the first time, effort starts to multiply. He can earn more, save more, think further ahead. The future stops feeling like something to fear and starts feeling like something he can influence. That alone changes a person. Because when survival loosens its grip, even slightly, your mind gets space back. You start thinking beyond today. You start imagining next month, next year, maybe even a different life. But then, Daniel hits a wall, because no matter how good he gets, there's still a limit. His hands can only do so much. His time only stretches so far. His energy runs out. If he gets sick, work stops. If demand drops, income drops. If someone faster or cheaper appears, pressure rises. And that's when he starts noticing people who play the game differently. People who don't just create value with their hands. People who move value. People who use distance, timing, relationships, and information. People who don't need to be the best craftsman in the room because they've learned how to position what others produce. And once Daniel sees that, he can't fully unsee it. Because skill gives you power, but it also reveals the next ceiling. And above that ceiling is the first real taste of leverage. Level 4, the first leverage. There's a man named Marcus. Marcus doesn't build anything, at least not in the traditional sense. He doesn't shape wood. He doesn't forge metal. He doesn't spend his days making one object at a time. He moves things. That's his edge. He notices that the same goods have different values in different places. Something cheap here is expensive somewhere else. Something ordinary in one town becomes valuable in another. So he buys low, moves it, sells higher, and keeps the difference. At first it's small, one trade, then another. Nothing dramatic, nothing that looks like power from the outside. But over time, his thinking starts to change. He stops measuring progress in hours and starts measuring it in decisions. One good decision can outperform weeks of labor. One bad decision can wipe out months of progress. And that pressure forces him to evolve quickly. He studies patterns. He watches markets. He pays attention to timing. He builds relationships. He learns who to trust, who to avoid, when to move, and when to stay still. And then, one day, it clicks. Money isn't just something you earn. It's something you position. That realization changes him. Because once he understands that, everything accelerates. He hires others, expands his reach, uses capital to create more capital. And for the first time, his income disconnects from his direct effort. This is where leverage begins. Not from working harder, not from being more disciplined, not from waking up earlier than everyone else, but from playing a completely different game. And this is the shift most people never make. Because once you see it, you can't go back to thinking like the levels below. You can't pretend effort alone explains everything. You can't look at wealth the same way. You start seeing distance, timing, access, Information. Structure. You realize that some people aren't winning because they're doing more work. They're winning because their decisions carry more weight. But even here, there's still a limit. Marcus is moving through the system. He's using it. He's learning how to benefit from it. But he doesn't control it. He still depends on roads, permissions, trade conditions, taxes, protection, and the favor of people above him. He can win big, but he can also be blocked, restricted, delayed, ruined by a rule he didn't make. Because Marcus is still operating inside a system controlled by someone else. And eventually, he runs into someone who doesn't just play the game. He decides who gets to play. Level 5. The Rule Maker. The man's name is Victor, and Victor doesn't compete. That's the first thing you notice about him. He isn't trying to be the fastest, the strongest, or the most talented. He isn't trying to outwork Marcus. He isn't waking up every morning looking for the next opportunity the way a trader, a builder, or a craftsman would. Victor plays a colder game than that. He decides who gets to chase the opportunity in the first place. Victor sits at the center of something most people never even think about. Access. If you want to enter the trade, you go through him. If you want to grow, you align with him. If you want to operate at scale, you need his approval, directly or indirectly. He doesn't build the products. He doesn't transport the goods. He doesn't negotiate every deal. He doesn't need to, because Victor sets the conditions that make those deals possible. Standards, permission, boundaries, who is allowed in, who has to wait, who gets protection, who pays more, who gets blocked before they even begin. And because of that, money flows to him in a completely different way. Not from effort, not even from individual decisions like Marcus, but from position, from being embedded inside the structure itself. And once you reach this level, something changes again, because you're no longer trying to win inside the game. You're shaping how the game is played. You influence who gets in, who stays out, what's allowed, what isn't. And that level of control is difficult for people below to even fully see. From the outside, it looks like power, and it is. But it's not complete, because no matter how much influence Victor has, there are still forces above him. Forces that don't ask. Forces that don't negotiate. Forces that don't care how carefully he built his position. They simply enforce. Level 6. The Enforcer. That's where Adrian lives. Adrian doesn't build wealth the way others do. He doesn't trade. He doesn't produce. He doesn't structure markets. He protects them. He enforces order. When Adrian walks into a room, the room changes. Conversations become shorter. People choose their words more carefully. Decisions get made faster. There's weight behind his presence, a kind of authority that doesn't need to explain itself every time it enters. And for a while, it feels like real power, because people respond to him. They listen. They act. They make space. They understand that Adrian represents something larger than himself. But over time, something becomes clear. That power isn't fully his. It's borrowed. It comes from alignment, from loyalty, from serving something bigger than his own will. His authority works because it is connected to a larger structure. The moment that connection weakens, the power around him starts to thin out. And that creates a strange life. Strong, but dependent. Respected, but not secure. Feared by some, used by others. Because Adrian doesn't own the system. He maintains it. He stands between the structure and the people who might challenge it. And that difference matters more than it looks. Because maintaining power is not the same as possessing it. You can carry the sword. You can give the command. You can make people move. But if the authority behind you disappears, suddenly, the same room that used to obey you starts looking at you differently. That is the tension of this level. You have force. You have status. You have influence. But none of it is fully independent. And above Adrian, there is someone who doesn't need to enforce the system every day, because the system is already arranged to benefit him. Level 7, the owner. Above him is someone like Robert. Robert doesn't enforce the system. He benefits from it. He owns land, resources, route, rights, entire flows of activity. Decisions he makes don't just affect him, they ripple outward. Villages shift. Trade routes adjust. Families feel the impact of choices made from a distance by someone they may never speak to. From the outside, it looks like Robert has made it. Control, stability, influence, A life where the daily panic of survival is finally gone. A life where other people work, move, build, and negotiate inside a world that already tilts in his direction. It looks like he has reached a level where nothing can really shake him anymore. But that's not what it feels like from the inside. Because the higher you go, the more invisible the pressure becomes. Robert's position isn't just about what he owns. It's about relationships, alliance, trust from people above him, and obedience from people below him. One misstep, one broken agreement, one shift in loyalty, one poorly timed decision, and everything begins to move. Not gradually, suddenly, because at this level, power isn't fixed. It's negotiated, constantly, and that creates a different kind of weight. This isn't about survival anymore. It isn't about growth. It isn't even about simple control. It's about balance, maintaining a structure that can turn unstable at any moment. And the more you see it, the more the pattern reveals itself. Each level gives you something, and quietly takes something else away. More freedom, but more exposure. More control, but more dependency. More distance from survival, but more responsibility for the structure that keeps you there. And eventually, all of it leads to one place. Level 8, the center. At the very top, there's a man named Edward. And Edward doesn't wake up to work. He wakes up to decide. Everything beneath him exists inside a structure he holds together. Land, trade, loyalty, power, protection, punishment, reward. It all flows through him in some way. From the outside, it looks absolute. Like this is the end of the game. Like nothing sits above him. Like every other level has been leading here, to the one place where control finally becomes complete. But that illusion doesn't last. Because the higher you go, the harder it becomes to see where things can break. Edward makes a decision. Just one. It doesn't feel dramatic at the time. A small shift in taxes. A favor given to someone he trusts. A delay in addressing a problem that seems manageable. A quiet insult someone powerful does not forget. Nothing urgent. Nothing dangerous. At least, not on the surface. At first, nothing happens. The structure still stands. The routines continue. People still bow. Messages still arrive. Orders still move. Then, something subtle changes. A noble hesitates. A commander questions. A merchant quietly adjusts his route. A family that once supported him starts waiting before answering. Not openly. Not all at once. But enough. Enough to weaken something just beneath the surface. And then, it spreads. Trust starts to crack. Loyalty becomes conditional. The structure that once felt solid begins to loosen. Not slowly, all at once. Because at this level, stability isn't built on effort. It's not even built on control. It's built on alignment. And the moment that alignment breaks, everything that looked permanent starts collapsing like it was never stable to begin with. That's the truth. No one at the bottom can see. The greatest power in the system is also the most fragile. Because when you're at the center, there's nothing above you to absorb the shock. No one else to blame. No higher structure to hide behind. No safe place where responsibility disappears. And in that moment, everything becomes clear. There is no level where you are completely safe. Only levels where the risks become harder to see and far more expensive to ignore. So the question changes. It's not about how high you can climb anymore. It's about whether you actually understand the rules of the level you're stepping into. And when you step back, really step back, and look at the entire system, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Every level has its own rules. And if you're playing by the wrong ones, you don't just slow down. You stay stuck. Not because you're not trying hard enough. Not because you lack ambition. Not because you need one more motivational quote, one more routine, one more productivity system. But because the way you're trying doesn't work where you are. And that brings everything back to you. Not your effort. Not your discipline. Not the amount of time you spend pushing harder. But your position. Because the real question isn't how much you're doing. It's where you're doing it from. What level are you actually operating in right now? And maybe even more important than that, are you following the rules of your level? Or the rules of a level you haven't reached yet? Because the moment you see that clearly, things don't magically change overnight. But your direction does. Your decisions start to align differently. You stop forcing progress and start positioning for it. You stop treating every setback like a personal failure and start asking what kind of structure produced it. You stop copying people who are playing with different leverage and start studying the actual rules of the level you're in. And that awareness, that shift in perspective, that first honest look at where you really stand, that's the first real step out of the loop. So if this made you rethink where you are in the system, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And comment the level you believe you're in right now and what you think has been holding you back from stepping into the next one.